All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and today is an amazing episode. It's Q&A day. We love these folks. We're talking about CGT, talking about first homeowners grants, and we're also talking about dobbing in landlords in Victoria. What's all that about, Ben? What else do we cover?
Well, mate, the social government in Victoria are out there with these compliant audit teams, so we're going to teach you a little bit about what you need to know about minimum standards for your properties in Victoria. And finally, in what's making property news, it is a weighing machine or a voting machine. It's a voting machine for lending at the moment for investors. I'll give you the latest data in what's making property news.
Folks, you do not want to miss that. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and of course, welcome back to you, Ben. Can you smell that, Ben? Can you smell that in the air? It's
is that spring?
It's spring. It's finals. It's just a lot to be excited about, particularly when you're a Victorian, Ben. Well, I'm not a Victorian. I'm a sandgroper who lives in Victoria. You got to get it.
How long have you been here for? Do you want it's okay to come across. It's okay to say that you're a Victorian.
I left Perth in 2002. So that makes it 23 years on the East Coast and 27 years in Perth.
Okay. All right. No, Sand Group. I get it. Hey, mate, big day because it's Q&A day. We love our Q&A day, so I can't wait to get into it.
We love it, mate. So, but there is a important update from Moorr that you want to share with us.
I just want to remind people of, if you're new to the pod and you don't know about what Moorr does, it's basically an environment it's a platform that helps our clients, obviously, but we've also made it free to the public to use to effectively get their financials, the home financials in order and do all the paperwork. But it really is built for property investors because we've got things like rental analysis on there. You can track your property portfolio. So the new MyPROPERTY Portfolio View, if you've got one or two or three or four properties and you want to actually, if you've got 37 properties, you can still use it, right? It's built to be able to be used by that. So we just love the fact that it shows the cash flow projections, all the historical insights and so forth. So it's just a little shout out for, it really is built for aspiring Australians. But if you're an aspiring Australian who loves to organise your finances, but you also manage your property portfolio, Moorr's the place.
Moorr is the place, and it's spelled MOORR, ben.com.au. Go and check that out. But hey, we do have Q&A day. I'm looking forward to that. But Ben, Sale of the Century. Did you ever watch Sale of the Century when you were growing up?
I did, with Tony Barber. Yes, good old Tony Barber.
Do you remember the host, Nikki Buckley? She was She lives down here in Torquay, right? And her there's a bunch of property professionals that I get together with on once a month that are in the Greater Geelong region that we meet down here in Torquay. And one of them is Nikki Buckley's son. His name's Jasper, and he's a ripper human. He's in the buyer's agency world. And he last time we caught up, he gave me this little black book, Ben. And for those playing along at home, it says Warren Buffett speaks, wit and wisdom from the world's greatest investor. He dropped it on my lap and he had to run. So I texted him. I said, mate, thanks for that. He goes, listen, you quote the oracle more than the man himself. So I thought it'd be a handy little index of Warren quotes. And he said, I hope you find it useful.
Right? He's just made your job a lot easier.
Mate, it like you would love it, Ben. It's just little nice Warrenisms. And so I've been thumbing it through. So over the next few weeks, I might, when one's jumped out at me, I'm going to.
Thanks, Jasper.
In honor of Jasper in his thoughtful gift, and just so everyone knows, it's called Warren Buffett Speaks, Wit and Wisdom from the World's Greatest Investor by Janet Lowe.
Nice plug for Janet Lowe. Grab the book.
We make sure we're not plagiarising Janet's work. She's done a great job. So I'm certainly encouraging people to get their hands on a copy. But this is one I think you'll like it, Ben. We both have this mutual love of basketball. We played it as a junior. Our kids love it. We still You and I had a game of one-on-one back in the US maybe 6 years ago when we were at our hotel, and you ripped your back because you were trying to outdo me and I was trying to outdo you. So it's just typical sad stories of middle-aged men who still think they've got it. But this is what Warren Buffett said in the book, Ben. I'm like a basketball coach, Buffett explained. I go out on the streets and look for 7-footers. If some guy comes up to me and says, I'm 5'6", but you ought to see me handle the ball, I'm not interested. Hey? So then I thought, that sums up our investing philosophy, right? We're after just a couple of good 7-footers, right? Yep. In terms of $3,000 per week. You got your home you live in, you got your super over here, and then just go and find 2 7-footers.
Two really nice investment properties and to get on with living again.
Get on with living again. So I thought you'd like. Do you like that? That was.
I do like that. Yeah. Well, but I do. Obviously, what he's also speaking to it is that if you're, basketball's an unfair game if you're short, right? Yes. And in property, if you are going for a couple of 2-footers, then the best 2-footers to buy are the ones that the land value is going to appreciate the most and has the greatest scarcity, and has, to Warren's point, it has a margin of safety, and and it has a future productive use. So there's a lot of gold in that.
But if you really lean into it, he goes, but if someone comes up to me and says, I'm 5'6", but you ought to see me handle the ball, that's the noise. Like, this is a regional town and there's lots of people. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can really extrapolate that out and really get under the bonnet of it. So
gold. Thank you again, Jasper. That's pretty cool. And thanks, Janet, for sharing all those Warrenisms. I like that.
Warrenisms. Hey, Q&A day today. First question is from Amanda on Speakpipe. Let's have a little listen to Amanda's question right now.
Hi, Bryce and Ben. I love your podcast. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I've listened to, I think, every episode. I don't know if you've answered this question. If you have, I apologise. My question is around a married couple who own properties individually in each name. So each partner owned the property prior to the marriage. One property was then used as the principal place of residence whilst the other property was rented out. If both properties were sold in the same year to purchase another principal place of residence, would capital gains tax apply to one of those properties, or would they both be CGT free under the 6-year rule? So one property had been rented out for 5 years and the other property was used as the principal. Both properties were purchased since capital gains tax rules came in. Thank you. Look forward to your response.
Whoa, Ben, isn't that a cool question? Hey, is there any way we can dance around capital gains tax exemption on the principal place of residence, Ben?
Well, obviously, your principal place of residence traditionally is capital gains tax exempt.
Yes.
There are, so let's first understand, and we might refer to that as the main residence.
Yes.
Is exempt.
The greatest taxation gift that the Australian Taxation Act offers to anyone, bar none, is the rental place.
So you've never rented out that property and you've lived in that property and you've declared that property as your main residence. My understanding is, let's talk to statements of fact.
Yes.
My understanding is that the sales proceeds and the gain that you make is tax-free.
It is tax-free. So the question is, can we both get tax-free? Like, we've both had it as our main residence, can we? And to your point, let's talk to some statements of fact, right? So first of all, we've clarified the first thing. PPR has the exemption. Number two, a married couple, actually, I'm going to start from the top, Ben. This is conversation starters for your accountant. We are not giving you advice. We are giving you general guidance for you to have open dialogue with your appropriate professional. Please do not say because Bryce and Ben said. But with that as a backdrop, we've done, we've been around the sun a few times, Ben. So here's our response to this question. A married couple, which includes de facto. So just be mindful of the de facto status. Married seems more straightforward, but the de facto is where you can often get caught with this, is treated as one tax unit for purposes of the exemption.
Yep.
Shut the gate. One. So it means that you can only have one main residence between you at any time with some limited exemptions, right? So there is a 6-year rule. So it means if you move out of your home and rent it, you can treat it as your main residence for up to 6 years. Here's the catch, provided you don't nominate another property as your main residence during that same period. And that's the important point here. So this is why it's common. This is what's commonly called the 6-year rule. So if we think about the scenario of what's just been described in this question, very good question from Amanda. I reckon a lot of people would,
a lot of people want to know this, if they can get away with saving a bit more tax.
So we had partner A had a property used as a family home, and partner B, we're just being generic so everyone gets it, partner B owned property number 2 and rented out for 5 years. Both were bought after 1985 because the clue we got was that capital gains tax was introduced, and both sold in the same year. So they can't claim a separate exemption. So they need to nominate one property as the main residence for both of them. And then apportion the exemption between the two properties based on when. So if they nominated different times that they,
well, they've got to be, if they've lived in one property all of that time, you can't just nominate it as your main. Unless, to your point, that there was a reason. Like, you can't just say, 6-year rule. It's like there's got to be a dominant purpose. Like, if the ATO was to audit you and say, did you actually ever live in it for owner-occupied purposes? No. Have you got a file note that says, or did you buy it for owner-occupied purposes, but your circumstances changed that set you to the other side of the town and it was just impractical to live there? Like, there's all of those little nuances, hence why I talk to your accountant about what that looks like.
I think the important point here is, to your point there, the Australian taxation system is self-assessment, right? Which means you can get away with anything you like for a period of time. But if you if what you've done is tax evasion rather than tax avoidance, there are two very clear outcomes. That one, if you're avoiding tax, fine. But if you're evading tax, all the best. Hopefully you've got a lot of people who like to come and visit you.
So can I summarise that? So if you break the law and you get caught, then you will be either fined, have charges of insurance, or worst case, go to jail. So no, that's all right. But it's a self-declaration.
Yes. That's to my point. You can get away with anything you like for a certain period of time, until you get found out.
Until you get caught.
I think the important point there is we obviously have got a bit of tongue in cheek here, and it's a very serious question, Amanda, just for the record. We think it's a good one. But you just said, well, you role played. If the tax department comes to you and says, "Can you justify it?" That's actually what happens. Like in an audit, they go, "You assessed it at this, justify it." Make sure it's underpinned by the Tax Act, right? So then it's on you, and then you better make sure that you actually have some rigor around why you did. So that's why this is such a good question, because I think the key to the question is what we talked about at the very top. A married or de facto couple is treated as one tax unit for the purposes of the exemption. There we go. Once you know that, it's game over. So it's a classic. You can't have your cake and eat it too moment in tax. You get one principal place of residence exemption, not one each. And here's the safest message, and this is the bit that we want to ram home. Get tailored tax advice, right? Because the election that you make and around which property to treat as the main residence can make a big difference, and the ATO won't let you double dip. So go and get quality advice. Go and get someone who can give you the pay for the best advice that you can get in this, because sequencing and optimizing that particular exemption probably is one of the greatest gifts that you can try and give yourself under the current Australian tax system.
And if I can add just one little bit of extra flavour to that, the timing of the sale and when we do our annual tax compliance returns, there can be potentially, and this is where you want to get your tax advice, the opportunity where you ask your tax accountant, when would that tax fall due? So when do I need to pay, if I've got a capital gains event, when do I need to pay that? So if you pay that and that event falls due, 9 months, 11 months, 12 months, whatever later, then the reality is you can still potentially take that parcel of money that you've received post-settlement, park it in an offset, don't spend it, it's not your money, don't spend it. but then ultimately then when the tax is due and payable. So the timing of, which way you do that. Now, in the event, let's say hypothetically, only one property is a principal place of residence and one property is for investment, they can both be sold in the same year if it's really clear, because there's no tax due on payable on that one. And so ultimately they can get on with their goal here. So it sounds to me Amanda and her partner have a goal of upgrading to a nicer property, and minimising their non-deductible debt. And not saying that's a strategy. That's just, again, the dominant purpose is we want a nicer house, and we want to have less debt on the nicer home. So that's true, but and then this is where the tax accountant will ask lots of interesting questions around. So, are you in a de facto relationship? Do you live in the two separate houses? Well, you don't, because you're renting one out. So there's only one home you live in. That's going to be your main residence. So I don't think that there's much to do and see here in terms of trying to evade or avoid or minimise your tax in this situation.
Hey, good question, Amanda. Thank you for that.
Yes, thanks. Great question.
From Giovanni. Giovanni asked a question about first home buyers incentives. Let's have a little listen to Giovanni's question now, Ben.
Hi, Bryce and Ben. I know you've spoken a lot about the many first home buyers incentives. Now, there's a lot of information online about eligibility. I've been married for 7 years and have already purchased previously property under my name. My question is, can my partner, who has never purchased a property, take advantage of any of the incentives? From what I've been able to research online, if one spouse has already purchased or owned a property, it disqualifies the other from any of the first home buyers incentives. Are you able to confirm this? Thanks, Bryce and Ben.
Hey, Ben, kind of in the same sort of family of question around incentives and what does that look like. So I can speak from experience from this, Ben, because my first purchase, I bought in tenants in common with my mentor at the time back in 1999, and I was 20% owner and the mentor was 80% owner, all right? So it wasn't even half a share. Bang, disqualified me from first home owners grants, right? Which was...
and I was one of the fortunate ones, Bryce, that got $10,000 in my first... I think, was it 10 or was it 14? I can't remember, so long ago. But yes, so I was able to get the first home owners grant because I did actually buy the house across the road from mum and dad, and I lived in it. I moved in to obviously meet the criteria. And then when I moved interstate for work, I then rented it out. And I rented it out for about 5 to 6 years and then stupidly sold it.
Oh, I was going to say, mate, that'd be worth a fortune now. You still got it? Is it a great story?
Yeah, no, I think it's the unrealised gains are probably now sitting at around $800,000.
Yeah, wow. All right.
Anyway, we digress. So let's talk about some of the things. So we do know that there are first buyers incentives, and they are things like grants, stamp duty concessions, saving schemes, all these different types of things that can allow you to get onto the property ladder. And we think that that's great in terms of what that story does. Now, in terms of the federal initiative, that's pretty clear in terms of that. Now, the treatment at a state-by-state level, there sometimes can be some grey areas. So to the point that I was, when Bryce and I spoke about this sort of example a couple of days ago, I have an example of someone I know where they were successful in getting that grant. Now, again, it was a long time ago where the female party to that application had not received any grants and so forth, but the male to that party he'd already owned a home previously. He wasn't owning a home at the time, so that they didn't have a home at the time, and that happened in Western Australia. And so whether that was a self-declaration and it wasn't checked, or whether Western Australia had those rules in place, is an important one. And that's why I always say that here's the regulation that I'm reading as well, Giovanni, but I'd always clarify that because it can be a little vague in some respects. So I'm jumping on the State Revenue Office or whatever and ringing them and saying, here's our scenario. What does that look like? What sort of concessions might we be able to. And of course, your investment savvy broker who does this all the time, your broker should know this backwards, especially, if they're dealing in particular states, if you've got a local broker, but if you've got a broker who's also across it, or you've got a big team of brokers like we do, they know the rules.
I think that's important, right? Because 2 points you said there. Use a professional who's dealing with it all the time, and go and look in the finer details yourself. But let's give some general guidelines.
Yes, please.
For people to have conversation starters with the people that they want to talk about. So first of all of these incentives generally have a spouse test, right? So that's the first part, the first gate. And if either spouse, including de factos, have ever owned residential property in Australia, then generally speaking, neither of you are considered first home buyers for the purpose of the grants and concessions, not for the purpose of having a conversation with your friends to say, I've never owned a house before, so therefore I am a first home buyer. Tick. Yeah. That's but for the purpose of getting access to some moolah, Ben, to help you with these grants, you are considered that you are not considered.
Correct. And I can also tell you because first homeowners grants have been around for a couple of decades, if not longer now, probably 30 years. Back in the day also, I know of examples where if you own an investment property, but you actually had an owner-occupied home, you could actually get access to the grant. So this is where I think, over time, the governments have tightened that legislation and those rules. So it really is, again, do the research with your broker, and then obviously, if you're not quite sure, a phone call.
Let's 3 minutes about the good old days. Remember the good old days when you used to buy a property in this country before GST was introduced, and every single property you purchased was cash flow positive in most cases. Remember the days when there was no capital gains tax? So we could do that for a while. But the point is that it's gone from not a lot of people talking about investment property to now social media has meant that everyone is, that's a big statement, isn't it? Lots and lots of people are exposed to investment property as an alternative. So I find it interesting. We had this conversation, you and I, yesterday. We were talking about a trust back in the noughties, Ben, and you went and spoke to your accountant. Tell that story. I think it's important.
Oh yeah, it's a good one, right? So I was obviously an enthusiastic amateur in my first decade of property investing, and I was reading everything, consuming the magazines and whatever is about at the time, and I came across a book, how to legally reduce your tax when investing in property. Ed Chan and Melbourne, the old Chan and Naylor sort of, I think, business at the time. I'm trying to think of the other Martin, someone or whatever. Tony Melvin. That's right. Thank you. They had a hybrid property investment trust structure, which meant that I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, this is incredible. The lower income earner can receive the income. The capital gain, and the higher income can receive the income benefit or the negative gearing benefit. Wow, what an amazing hybrid trust!
Smart.
And they had a private ruling on it, and so I ring my accountant and said, "This is going to be big, Clinton. I mean, every man and his dog's going to get into this particular scheme." And he said, "Yeah, and that'll be the downfall of it."
Yeah.
And so he gave me some of the best advice I'd received from my new accountant, because remember, it was the old accountant that basically told me to sell my property to buy an off-the-plan apartment when I bought my first property back in the early or late 1990s. Okay, so here we are. And so he just said, they'll change it. And, over time, they've tweaked family trusts and, to distribute income and all of those other things. So the more something becomes mainstream and the more that the ATO loses revenue or is not gaining revenue for the government, they will tweak it. And so that's exactly what's happened now. Distributions through a family trust to a minor used to be $3,000. Now it's $300. So it's not even worth it because you've got the paperwork to get it all done. So there are some examples that we always say. So the government intentionally want to do this for people who are buying their very first home. But if you have bought another property, you're probably not ineligible now. And then to Bryce's point, the spouse test says, actually, you've already got a foot in the door on the property market, so you should be okay.
So a couple of the little important things. In this case, Giovanni has already purchased in the past, even though the partner hasn't. So therefore, in our view, they would be disqualified. Go and check with your professional, but in our view, they would be disqualified.
And check with your state.
And state, a couple of important nuances here is that you've flagged this, Ben, is that state-based discrepancy. So that's why you want to test that. There's only one potential workaround is that if the partner buys individually and declares themselves separate, so you guys are separate, there might be an opportunity there that you would look at. But again, you need to get some advice around that. But double check the fine print on that. So in our view, your partner won't qualify. So here's the key takeaways. It is a common misconception that I thought my partner hasn't. So shouldn't that still count as their home buy? Well, to my point earlier, it does when you're having conversations with your mates at a barbecue, but is not the way the government sees it. They see it definitely different. They assess you together. So therefore, you will miss out on the incentive. So check your local.
And so those de facto relationship statuses matter. Obviously, when you're married, you've got a contract. It's a signed piece of paper, right? It's a legal binding document. De facto relationships, living together. So you've got to be thinking about those types of things. And of course, from a lending application point of view, are you a borrower? And if you're a borrower, it means you've got a financial interest in the property versus a guarantor. And a guarantor doesn't take any financial interest in the property, but supports the bank's risk in terms of lending the money. So definitely from that point of view, it's a fair question. We haven't precisionally answered to yes, 100%. But hopefully we've given you the flavour of where this is going. And that's to say, highly unlikely that if you've owned a property before, in most states and territories, you will not be eligible for certain grants. But are there other incentives? Like have a look at the fine print on the tax exemptions, as opposed to a grant, which is a bucket of money, which gets adjusted for at settlement usually as part of the land transfer. But there might be other incentives. So if you look at that fine print, you might saying, okay, well, it's interesting that doesn't qualify for building a new home. So building that new home in that state or territory might actually mightn't have the spousal test as an example. So that's why it's always good to get your advice from your broker or speak to your state revenue office in relation to this matter.
Great question, Giovanni. I reckon that's helpful for a lot of other people in our community too. Thank you for sending that through. Next one is from Amber. Amber's been on our show before, Ben, but she's got a question about Victorian government property compliance audit. Let's have a little listen to Amber's question now.
Hi, Ben and Bryce. My name is Amber. I was just wanting to ask a question about the Victorian government's approach to enforcement of the minimum standards there. This week I received an email from my property manager advising that recently the government announced the creation of a task force of inspectors to be deployed to audit properties and fine the owners of non-compliant properties. The government is also providing a website that allows renters to anonymously notify them of properties that they believe are non-compliant. My property manager then provided details of a company who will go out and audit your rental property for you and let you know if you comply, obviously for a fee. I was just wondering if you have any information about this audit and how likely it is that inspectors are actually going to come and check out properties. Thanks very much.
There you go, Ben. Task force to dob in people. So we've got to take it seriously, right?
Bryce.
What have we done? What have we triggered in you?
The state government of Victoria. What do I say about this party? They're broke, so they're desperate for revenue. And so this task force is not only, and they're anti-property investor, right? Because they're socialist democracy that they're trying to create down here. There's a problem that, yes, we've got this. And so, look, here is the point. Attention all landlords in Victoria. If you're not providing safe and quiet enjoyment for your tenant, do so. Safe and quiet enjoyment means making sure that your minimum standards and your property is in good lettable order and your tenants are enjoying the experience of having safe and quiet enjoyment in that asset. However, Bryce, we have this vacant land tax, and we have, which, we've talked about before. Vacant land tax doesn't just mean a tax on vacant land. It means a tax on properties that are remaining unlet. And so they're coming after us right across Victoria. They're coming after all of our holiday homes, everything else, and they've got all these rules, and they've got these Taskforce that their one job is to raise money for the government because the government is broke, right? And they use the political spin, saying that it's to help, with the rental or housing crisis of rental supply. And if you're not going to rent it out, then let somebody else live in it, like a good socialist, state would say. It doesn't matter if you own it, you've bought it, and you're right for ownership. Don't worry about that in Victoria. This is basically part of this new task force that is anti-property investors. So this is what's going to happen whilst this government still remains in power. So it is a serious thing. And to that point, speak to your property manager about making sure that your property is compliant. Right? Now, it's interesting, Bryce, isn't it, that there are potentially businesses now that have started up, compliance businesses that have started up, seen an opportunity here, and potentially can go out and do a compliance audit on your property. Another cost to the small business private rental accommodation owner in Victoria to see whether this is happening. Now, my thoughts initially, Bryce, would be, wouldn't my property manager know the rules? I'm paying them to sort of get a sense of what the rules are. So when they're doing their 6 monthly inspections, I would hope that if there is any concern, that they might flag that to me for further investigation. So I've got two things to say here. Property managers, please, as you're going out and doing those inspections, just make sure that you're doing the job that the owner of the property is asking you to do in the fees that you charge us. And then second, if not, please let us know and we will make sure we rectify any issues in that property. That's the finish of my rant, Bryce.
Oh, I like it, Ben. All right. Well, okay, a couple of things. Largely, since the Residential Tenancies Act reforms in 2021, these minimum standards were largely self-policed, right? But what this is actually showing is now there's a shift from passive to active enforcement. So that's the bit that we've got to put our mind to and go, okay, if there's active enforcement, what can we do? Well, if you've now got a spot where a tenant can dob you in, it's more important than ever that you actually do get this right. So I think Ben summarised that beautifully. You should be putting the pressure onto your property manager to do this. Now, I understand why a property manager would do that, because they go, all right, well, we don't want to be seen to be
correct, because they've got
here that
they can be fined as well, right? Yeah.
But so here's the summary, right? That you can get someone to go and do it. To Ben's point, it's adding another layer of cost. But so if you do nothing, though, you face enforcement action, fines, and orders to rectify, right? So here's the summary. Don't ignore it. Compliance isn't optional, right? You've got to work with your property manager to get through the checklist and fix any of the gaps. And if your property isn't up to standard, if it's not up to standard, fix it. But if it is up to standard, you've got nothing to fear. But here's the important point for you, Amber. The audit that they've suggested is not compulsory. It's not. It's just whether or not where do you sit in your risk averse scale and where do you sit on the service levels from your property manager? Because at the end of the day, if you're not compliant, they're coming for you. They're not coming for the property manager. They're not coming for the tenant. So you just got to do whatever you got to do to underpin those minimum standards, and hopefully you've got a good working relationship with your property manager.
It is a classic example of what regulation does in a lot of respects. So because the property manager is also on the hook under this new legislation, the property manager is, with their rightful means, are basically saying, hey, we're letting you know, number one, we're giving also the option for you to do something about it in terms of getting it audited. And so in the event that these inspectors come back and look at what we've done as the property managers, we're squeaky clean. right? Now, obviously, we run a financial services business across Australia. We have lots of obligations and compliance and regulations, but we also do something similar in respect of, if you're getting yourself into debt, taking out a mortgage and you've got a family behind you, then we do ask you about what sort of protections do you have in the event that, you get injured or get sick. And so it's a duty of care in terms of asking you, are you okay with that? And so ultimately, what we don't want to have is our customers coming back to us and saying, you never told us about that. We're going to blame you for the fact that we're struggling with our mortgage or whatever that may look like. So we can understand that sort of through regulation, everyone starts to sort of protect their own butts and all of these other types of things. I mean, that's the flow-on effect of what regulation here is. But I still come back to the start of the question. Safe and quiet enjoyment, making sure that your property manager knows what the regulation is and asking them to ensure, based off their knowledge, how you are in terms of those regulations. They just don't want the pushback in the event that they get it wrong. So hence a business opportunity and compliance comes up again. And now we've got these proactive opportunities for you to get that audit. And in some respects, they're guaranteeing those audits. So they're sort of putting themselves on the hook in terms of saying that we've done the inspection. And so even in, a private inspection. So if the government inspector comes and says, we don't think you're compliant, you can obviously lean on that, the private inspector to rectify the situation because you thought you were compliant. And I think most regulators take a common sense approach initially, which is a warning or a means by which you can rectify that in a certain period of time without any risk of fines in it. But if you're a slumlord and you're a scumbag landlord, and everything's about you making as much money as possible, then you deserve to be prosecuted as part of that, because we don't want you as landlords. I mean, you give us a bad name in terms of how you're looking after your clients in your property and running your small private rental accommodation business. So I think that's an important message here as well, that through the self-management, we haven't been able to get the balance right as far as the socialist government's concerned. So they're coming in here to basically, again, regulate the crap out of the industry to allow that to happen.
Wow. Tell us what you really think. Thank you. So there you go, Amanda, Giovanni. I love saying Giovanni. It's something
it's a beautiful
great name. And of course, I love saying Amanda and Amber too. Thank you for your wonderful questions and contributing to our Q&A day today. Ben, my life by design hack today is the best advice I received as a parent of young kids was we said this to our kids, if you ever get lost, what we want you to do is we want you to find a female with a pram and ask them to call us, right? Just because the probability of being returned safely back to us, a female with a pram, we were obviously demographically profiling that a mother's heart knows better than anyone else, right?
Yep.
I saw this bit of advice. My kids are obviously 12 and 14. Yours are older too, but it's more for the I wish I knew this bit of advice back then when my kids were starting to have that independence away from me. And it was this. Yep. Number one rule to teach a child, teach them this phrase: safe adults don't ask kids for help. So if an adult asks them to find a lost puppy or help with directions, it's a red flag. So practice role-playing this with them regularly. So I thought, okay, that's probably number 2. That's pretty good, right? If
I like that.
There's lots of things that parents need to impart on their kids, but there's some real number ones if they get lost and if they get spoken to from strangers. So safe adults don't ask kids for help. If we just let our kids know that if anyone asks you for help, that's a red flag, and a bit of role playing might help with that. So that's my life hack.
And I mean, with modern technologies and all these things these days, hopefully you've also got the family tracking.
Yes, little air tag in their shoes.
Well, air tag in the shoes, but even with their phone, I mean, look, I don't advocate for children 12, 13 having phones. I got told they have to have it because they're catching the school bus and all of these other things. But
when we caught the school bus, Ben, we were at a significant disadvantage because we didn't have a mobile phone. How did we do it?
Well, we
how did we do it? Really,
we did okay, and instead now our kids just sitting there and basically get lost in their social envy platforms, and it's causing all manner of strife in terms of their mental health.
Yeah.
So no, I know I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here, but I'm actually pro the government's. My oldest son is neurodiverse, and ultimately, he's got an addictive personality towards gaming and social media. So having that ban in place actually helps him.
Yeah, it helps
in terms of cope, because that's all he really wants to do. And so obviously we track him in terms of where he's going, because he can be a little bit.
Ben, is people get upset. They go, "Oh, freedom!" Like let us. But the thing is, here's the challenge. And we're venturing into territory that we're not experts in. But but we're experts in our own children. It's the lowest common denominator. If you remove your kids from doing it, they become social lepers. So the fact that there's an opportunity that everyone has to have that same common denominator. That's
and if it was 1% of the population, I'd look for an alternative. But I promise you, any child that's it's neurodiverse and has got all of those type, and it might be 20, 30, 40% of the population. So whilst 60%, that's just too big a risk in terms of and we're seeing it in, obviously, again, you're right, we're not experts in this area, but we're seeing it in terms of resilience, mental health issues in children. We're unfortunately seeing it also in terms of self-harm and obviously the worst cases of all, where people take their own lives, right? Just crazy stuff, because it's difficult. And we know that, these things spark, really positive addictional, messages to the brain.
There's people in labs in these
dopamines.
Exactly. To get them to be addicted. That's
right. And they get locked into a game, and then the next thing you know, they're 200 hours into the game. And so anyway, it's an addiction thing. It does play into the dopamine hits and so forth that go on in the brain as well. So, well, we went off on a bit of a tangent there.
Wow.
Here we are as
parenting experts. No, the point is that the number one piece of advice I got was the mother with the pram.
I love that.
But this one, I reckon's right up there. I wish I had known it back then. So,
no, definitely. Yep.
Hey, Ben, what's making property news?
Well, Bryce, a couple of weeks ago, we did our economic outlook, or for the property market outlook. So I wanted to build on that in terms of some data that we had around borrowing activity, because we've been making a case that, unfortunately, it's a voting machine at the moment, the market for investors. And that's showing up in the data. So if we have a look at the last quarterly data, we can see that the growth in owner-occupier lending is up 0.9 of 1%, right? But if we look at investors, it's up 3.5%.
4 times.
So almost 4 times. If you look at it in simple terms, 4 times the growth rate that we're seeing. Now, it is coming off a lower base, but this is the message that I want everyone to understand. Remember when lending got to 40 to 45%?
Oh, yes.
And APRA bought the macro prudential, right? We've warned you that this potentially could happen, and it could stop your strategy around getting access to finance, which can stop your property empire strategy and your get rich quick strategy. Nope. So then you can overlay that with other challenges. But right now, what we're seeing here in terms of by number of loans, 37.8% are investor loans, 62.2% are owner-occupier. So very similar in terms of value and volume. So the moment that moves towards 40, we're going to see a political storm continue to evolve around home ownership in this country is going backwards, and it's all because of investors. And so we need to change the regulation. While we're at it, let's change the tax story as well. So you have been warned again in terms of what's going to happen here. And we'll be doing an episode coming up soon on who you should get your financial advice from, because there are people giving financial advice who are breaking the law in terms of the advice that they're giving you if you want to be in this property empire, get rich quick environment. So the spruikers have moved from selling, there's still quite a few of them selling house and land packages and off the plan, and they're still making their mega commissions. But there's a new generation of spruikers who are teaching you how to buy quickly and keep going and going and going. And we think that it is unsustainable. It's politically unsustainable. So ultimately,
should we talk about that, Ben? Should we tell our audience? Oh no, that's right. We have been.
A couple of weeks ago, we told you in the property market outlook, the mid-year property market outlook.
I think
we'll keep reminding
the
them.
Last 3 months. So.
It's not our first rodeo.
Not our first one. I like it. Hey, thank you to Amanda. Thanks again to Giovanni. Thanks again to Amber for contributing to our show today. Really, really good questions. I want to invite people who are listening to this. I prioritise Speakpipe ones, Ben, because we love to include our community into the show. So if you've got a question, go on to thepropertycouch.com.au. There's a little yellow button on the side. If anyone doesn't know how to talk on a online thing post-COVID, Ben, I would like to meet them. So it's super simple.
Even just post ChatGPT. See that little microphone? Just click on it, and then you can talk.
It's I heard someone call it Chad PT the other day.
Chad PT.
It's their personal trainer. Chad the personal trainer. They went on chatted to Chad PT. So
I call mine Opti. It doesn't matter which platform I'm on. I call it Opti, short for optimization, which is the same one as we have inside the Moorr platform.
Inside the Moorr platform.
Side plug there.
Very good. Well, and as always, it's good to riff with you on Q&A Day, Ben. It's been our favourite now for 10 years. It still remains to be our favourite. We get to interact. It's usually you and me talking to two microphones, so it's good to interact with our community, and we want to encourage more of it, please.
Yes.
You can email, you can send it to us on socials. Our team collates them all, but Speakpipe is your number one way to go straight to the top. So until next week, Ben.
Knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it.
Act on it, folks. See you next week.